asked, I answered. We are here for Unveiling the Sidhe, the linguistic roots of Ireland's fairy folk. So, hello and welcome to our channel, to our podcast, wherever you're listening to this. I am Lora O'Brien of the Irish Pagan School, and today we're going on a little bit of a linguistic journey to examine one of the most mystical and enduring concepts within Irish culture and tradition, which is the Sidhe. So the Sidhe is a term that is rich in history, in folklore, and it really offers a window into, I suppose, a part of the soul, if I may be so bold, a part of the soul of Irish mythology, folklore, and all of our cultural traditions. So we are connecting now this world and the other world through this one term, the Sidhe. So we're going to look at how the word has evolved and how it was shaped, I suppose, by the cultural and spiritual landscape of Ireland, by the context of our history, and all of that good stuff. So the Sidhe has very ancient roots. The word Sidhe, it initially referred to the earthen mounds, the hollow hills, if you like, that dot the Irish landscape, which are old Bronze Age, not so much Iron Age, but definitely Bronze Age and Stone Age monuments, which would have maybe been ancestral burial mounds initially. The whole mound thing with regard to the archaeology gets a little bit hazy, because you also have, like, up into medieval times, you have raths and ring forts, which are often still referred to as she mounds. So the archaeological chronology or concept of the Sidhe is a little bit fuzzy, but basically any ancient monument could have and probably would have been referred to as a she mound or a she hill or a she fort. But originally that term for the mounds, they were believed to be portals, gateways into the Irish otherworld. So these connection points between the otherworld, which was literally another life on Sail Ella, which ran parallel or side by side with our mortal everyday world here. So that connection between our world and this realm that is, beyond our understanding in many ways, and maybe our ancestors' understanding as well, although maybe they understood a little bit more than we do today. There were many variations for that term. So in, I suppose, Middle Irish, it's S-I-D-H-E. It's all pronounced she, as I'm saying it now, just S-H-E-E. That's the pronunciation. But Sidhe is one of the Middle Irish spellings, I believe. But older than that, then we have spellings such as S-I-T-H, S-I-O-D-H, S-I-D-H, and with or without fathers on any of those I's, really. At various points in Irish history, the father or the accent mark in the Irish language was only standardized relatively recently with regard to the history of the language. So these terms all meant basically the same thing, these mounds originally. And they laid the groundwork for the association between these places of power and mystery in the Irish countryside, in the landscape, in our environment that we lived beside, that we passed by day to day. And then we would move from mounds as such to mystical beings. So as the centuries turned, the meaning of she underwent this transformation. So it began to represent not just the mounds themselves, but the actual beings, the supernatural beings that were linked to these ancient sites. Within our mythology, this could be the Tuatha De Danann. They were definitely part of the Sidhe, more closely associated with these mounds as such in their original context. So again, the Tuatha De Danann then became known as people of the Sidhe as well. And the Tuatha De Danann were not just the gods that we know, they were a whole tribe of peoples. So there were many different beings, entities, which were associated in this way with the term she. And this shift kind of reflects this deepening kind of mystical worldview, I suppose, in Ireland, where the landscape is still alive with stories, with spirits, with mythical beings, with all of that good stuff that we now know and come to associate with Irish culture, heritage, tradition, and of course our ancestry. Now, in modern Gaeilge, the term she is es I fada, and it captures both that essence of the fairy mound and the beings that it houses. So the Irish English dictionary entries would now include terms such as Aes-she, which are inhabitants of fairy mounds, and of course Banshee, which would be a fairy woman. Now there is a particular type of otherworld entity known as a Banshee, but there were also many other fairy women who were, I suppose, individually known as a Banshee or Mná-she. So all of this kind of illustrates the term's broadened scope, I suppose, encompassing a range of otherworldly concepts, language that developed to try and explain the interactions which were happening within our history, within our folklore, within our mythology, between our world and theirs. So contemporary interpretations and kind of cultural impact then would span a wide array of beings within Irish mythology. And currently in modern contexts, the she could mean anything from leprechauns to banshees to the puka. Sometimes the she then, or the mounds associated with them, would also kind of cover ghosts, spirits, fairy dogs, hounds, cats, all of these other remarkable creatures then that would be otherworld inhabitants who would maybe come into this world through the she mounds as well. And then we have kind of in modern Irish again, what remains now is this kind of diminutive term called sheog, S-I fada O-G, which probably comes from the Victorian influence where these beings were very much diminished into these tiny, cute, winged, sparkly, bottom of your garden kind of fairies that really, has this kind of lighter, more whimsical, less dangerous aspect to the fairy lore that really contrasts with actual Irish traditions of the she and those kind of ancient and I suppose more formidable or certainly more dangerous roots and again mythology and folklore that are really part of the actual essential tradition here in Ireland. And this evolution, I suppose, from the ancient mounds to this pantheon of mystical creatures that we have now, which are all called she, really kind of showcases the living traditions, I think, within Ireland, the dynamic and evolving nature of Irish culture, Irish traditions, Irish folklore, as we continue to this day to interact with these traditions here in Ireland. Even though they have been influenced certainly by external cultures, external values, there has evolved this, again, this dynamic kind of aspect to the term she, to the descriptions we have, to all of this. And the she in all its forms, whether it's the mounds in the landscape, the fairy hills, fairy mounds that people are still wary of, that they still avoid at night time, that they won't pass by on the way home from the pub in case they get stolen into the other world, right down to these beings and creatures and entities that, again, you are very likely to come across on a dark night in rural Ireland. And this mythological tradition is really this ever evolving culture of enchantment that really pervades Irish landscape and Irish culture. So I hope that has given you a perspective on the term she, on what we mean. We do reference them as fairies as well. We do talk about the other crowd, Nadini she, Nadini Maha, the good folk, the good people, the good neighbours. All of these would be terms which bear in mind, are not a description, but an honorific and a propitiation of these beings, these creatures, these entities, these figures from the Irish other world who, come into our world and can often cause trouble, mischief, damage, death and disability, or, kidnapping or coma or humps on your back or blindness or any of these wonderful things that she bring into our culture as Irish people experience them, continue to experience them to this day. So the she has these roots in the ancient mounds for sure, and really remains this vital part of the Irish culture, and is such a kind of a coverall or a catch-all term to explain this very complex web of relationship that we have with the other world and with the entities, beings, inhabitants who, often would cross into our world or take our people into theirs. So if you do want to learn more about the she, we do have many classes. I'll put a link below to the classes at the Irish Pagan School where you can absolutely deep dive. Myself, Lora O'Brien, I have taught many of these classes. We also have a resident expert, Morgan Daimler, who is a well-known author and has taught many classes for us on various aspects of this. And we have Dr. Gillian Kenny, who has made multiple references to the Banshee. There's actually a whole playlist on the channel about various aspects of Irish culture, where I interviewed Dr. Gillian Kenny on many of these topics, including the she. So definitely you have a lot of resources. I'll link them all below. You can check them out. And this video is by request. I did one introducing the topic of the she, which people commented below saying that they would love a series. So I'm going to put a link to the playlist for that series somewhere around here. Okay, so slán go fóill, and I will see you next time. Bye.